Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jodi Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. Welcome, Sherene. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. So I like to start out this conversation by asking you if you have an early story about how sound moved you at an early age, maybe.
Oh, yes. I can go back to when I was 16.
Ooh.
And I was at a movie theater and I was watching a really great scene in a movie where the violinist was like moving his bow. The camera was like panning around him. And I got to the end of that scene and like he lifts his bow up and I started clapping in the theater. And I realized that film had just totally taken me out of the movie theater and put me in like a concert hall. And I was like, ooh, I want to do that. I want to basically use sound to bring people to another world. And I pretty much at 16 decided I wanted to be a film composer.
Wow. So. Yeah, I guess that would do it. Yeah. You're not the first person who's quoted a movie being their inspiration. Yeah. Yeah. It seems to be common.
Movies have the power, right?
Yes, they totally
it's amazing.
do. Yeah, the music in movies specifically. And so it doesn't surprise me that you got into that. But what was your process then from being 16 to then?
Yes, right. It doesn't happen overnight. It took almost 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, I mean, I was already a musician. I was already writing music. But I was like, well, I got the advice to actually study music formally, and much in the same way like maybe a commercial or film actor would be told to get sort of a Shakespearean training, a formal theater training. I was told to get a classical music training. So I went to college, I applied to music schools, and I got in and I was accepted actually on a music scholarship at Indiana University School of Music, where I got a Bachelor of Music in music composition, studying orchestral scores and writing music for orchestras. But my parents also wanted me to have like a real career, quote unquote. If you can't see my
that
fingers,
wasn't real enough.
Yeah. So I actually also got a Bachelor of Science in audio recording, so that I would know how to be on the other side of the stage as well.
Okay.
And so that's what I did. And then, of course, after that, I was like, oh, I still really want to study film scoring. And so I ended up going to graduate school and I got a Master's of Music in Film Scoring.
Wow.
And then I moved to Hollywood and I lived in LA for about 10 years writing music for films.
What was the thing that you remember most about making that move and working on that sort of thing?
I mean, there's like what you learn in the classroom and what you do in real life, right? Like
That's
everyone
true.
must have stories like that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's the reality. There's like well, we don't really want to pay you much money for this project. Oh, it's going to take you like 6 months to do or 6 weeks or what? I mean, like, so it was like I had a lot of education. And I think this is actually across industries. It's not just related to film scoring. I think it could be even in other creative services and non-creative services that, what you learn in school is just a very small piece of the puzzle. And that, learning how to manage, client relationships, learning how to find work, learning how to manage projects and manage the funds and fees and all the financial sides of it. I mean, none of that I got out of school. So it's like the school of hard knocks, right? It's
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there a project that you worked on that you're particularly proud of?
Absolutely. I did the score to a documentary feature-length film called Small Voices. It was about an orphanage in Cambodia. And it particularly followed about like 5 or 6 kids and about their journey, how they ended up at this. I don't want to even say it was an orphanage, because it was also a school. So it was even kids who did have parents that were alive, but just couldn't support them, couldn't provide an education for them. And so it was different types of kids with different backgrounds, but following their journey. And so there was definitely a lot of emotion in this music. There was a little bit of like, providing somewhat of an Asian setting, because it was Cambodia. But there was also a very, very intense emotional aspect to it. A lot of these children were picking valuables out of garbage dumps and getting nearly crushed by the garbage compressors. And there is one scene, if you go to my IMDb account, you can watch the scene of this film, and it is so emotional. And I still watch it to this day, and it nearly brings me to tears.
Oh, well, that's a good thing to remember your time doing that. Yeah.
It was a great director. Really, Heather. Oh my God, I'm blanking on her last name. It's been about 15 years since I scored it.
Probably on the IMDb.
Yes, it's included there as well. But
yeah. So when you were doing that, what was the process of going? Like, how do you come up with a film score? I mean, that's big.
Yeah. I mean, it starts obviously with all the communication that you receive from the director and from their film itself. And, you really start off with just spotting the movie with the director, where you will go through the entire film and say, oh, okay, what kind of themes do we want to draw out here? What's the emotion? What's the feeling? And you can also, a lot of times directors include temp tracks, which is for visual language. That's often, drawing from like, art and visual language. So in music, it's drawing from other film scores, or it can actually be orchestral scores. So usually that's sort of like the jumping off point to get some inspiration. And then you come up with a musical language, and what are the best instruments and instrumentation for the scenes, what kind of themes do we want to create, and then extrapolate it into an entire film score.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like quite a process, definitely.
Yeah. One step at a time, right? Any painting starts with a single brush stroke, right? It's like there's many steps that go into any creative piece of work.
So true. So what got you out of that then? Because I know that's not what you're doing now.
Yes, that is true. So, I mean, what got me out of it is a little bit that I wanted to have a little bit more work-life balance, or I've also heard the term work-life integration, just in terms of being able to include personal things in my life that felt like it was a part of my life that was not all working. And so I ended up going back to school, and I learned graphic design. And shortly after learning graphic design, I actually learned motion graphics and animation. And so, that's what I am doing now. I run an animation studio, 87th Street Creative. And the graphic design was that little step, in a sense, between the film scoring and the animation, because I really feel like those are the bookends, or I like to say my life came full circle. The rhythm, pacing, and timing of music and film with the visuals of graphic design all come together in motion graphics and animation.
I love it. Yeah. So is this what we would term as explainer videos? Is that the idea?
Yes, that is correct. I know that word is often, it encompasses a lot now. I think you can have an app do it for you, an explainer video for $20 in about 20 minutes.
Well, you can have someone do your voice in an AI in 2 minutes.
Right. So it's the same thing. Now AI tools can do explainer videos. But, I sort of expand on that a little bit more and say, we really try to take complex topics and really explain them in a way that is going to be engaging. I often say I'm not in the business of animation. I'm in the business of engagement. So, and I'm sure that's actually a little bit how you feel with voiceover, right?
Very
It's
much
about
so.
feeling like you're talking to the person who's listening and you're bringing them in for every person who listens to your recorded voice.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And an AI can say the words, but it can't feel
Yes.
them.
Yep.
So it's
Spot
really
on.
hard to, yeah. As humans, we want to engage with each other,
Yep.
right? And this is really interesting because I'm about to talk to a neuroscientist about this. And what he said was that if we're actually listening or watching AI in its entirety, whatever it is that we've used to create with it, we don't tell the difference consciously, but subconsciously we do. It's really interesting how that works. So subconsciously, there's something in us that doesn't recognize another human, and we don't engage as much. And he has numbers to prove this because it's been a
Wow.
consistent thing. So that was really interesting to learn, to have that confirmed, because consciously it's true. A lot of times we can't really tell.
Wow.
We're getting
Yeah.
used to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I read recently an article by the author of oh my God, I'm going to totally blank on this. A famous author who wrote the film. I cannot think of it. But anyway, he basically came out with an article in the New Yorker about AI. And it really, in a nutshell, he said, creative choices come from life experiences.
Hmm.
And when you haven't had life experiences because you're a robot, it's like, it's not really art then. It's really not making choices in the way that we think of choices.
Yeah, it's just taking a bunch of
Awakened,
data.
that's the name of the book
Mhm.
that became the movie Awakened.
Oh,
The
okay,
author
okay.
of that wrote all about AI in a New Yorker article.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. I think that it has its uses. I'm not, I mean, we're in the age of AI right now. Like,
Yep.
it's not going away. The
Nope.
toothpaste is out of the
Out of the
tube.
tube, and you cannot put toothpaste back into a tube.
No, you cannot. Yeah.
Since you brought it up, I do have to say that I think of AI tools as much like Photoshop was to photographers in like the 1980s and 90s. And that it's like, yeah, use the tool, but you're still going to have to use your artistic choice, your artistic eye, your designer's eye. And nothing's really going to replace that. And while anyone can basically use and learn Photoshop, it's not, you know the difference between somebody who's a trained artist and somebody who's not.
You definitely do. Yeah.
So we'll see how the AI tools evolve over the next several years.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting that the software developers are not necessarily creatives, which is unfortunate because I think if they understood the creative mindset, the
Yeah.
tools might then reflect what we should actually be using them for a little more.
Yeah. It's a good
I mean, it
point.
depends on the tool, obviously, but
Right. Yeah.
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 Anyway, there's a lot we could talk
I was
about
going to say
there.
we could spend the next hour on that,
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
I'm not an AI expert, so
Yeah,
I won't.
no.
I won't do that.
Totally fine. Yeah. But I did want to ask you, because I know you're animating logos now, right?
Yep,
So you're
yep.
doing that with the sonic branding
Yep.
component to it. Can you talk a little about how you go about doing that and, where the sound comes in there?
Sure. So, I mean, it's about creating something that feels branded and uniquely branded. So branded in the sense that it fits a company's brand. It fits the personality of the brand, the company. And even if it could be a solopreneur, it could be of the person, the founder, the CEO of that company. But it's also then, okay, what does that visually look like? And what does that sound like? I often love to present my own animated logo when I'm on any Zoom call by having it in the background of my Zoom calls. But obviously, it's not going to have that sonic branding sound along with it. But whenever I do a presentation, I have that sonic branding playing with my visual of my animated logo. And the sound, it feels like me. It feels like my company. It feels like the values of something fun, something unique. These are all things that hopefully come out visually and orally. So it's just about putting that together. When you think about the sounds of animated the sounds that go with animated logos. I mean, the biggest one that comes to mind, of course, is McDonald's, ba-da-ba-ba-ba. How fun is that, right?
Yep.
Not a serious food experience, but something fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Intel one, dun, 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 right? It's very, that was American Express. I just mixed.
No, that was Intel. You're right.
That was Intel?
Yep,
okay,
that
gotcha.
was Intel. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm mixing them up. I forget what the American Express one is.
I can't remember that one off the top of my head now.
Yeah. But
I do remember the Intel one because I heard that on every commercial in the 80s.
Gotcha, right. But I mean, that one has this very sort of technical-ish feel, very computer, very digital.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just about having that brand reflected in the sound.
Okay, so logos are fantastic, and certainly animated logos make them way more interesting, definitely. Yeah. So when you add the sound into that, how have you gotten the input from your client? Have they really been behind the idea of adding the sound to that animated logo, or have you had to convince them?
It's usually convincing them.
Okay.
It's usually a process of convincing them. And it's not always easy. Often it ends up being more something that we develop as part of a larger piece. Like maybe we're doing an explainer video or a training video, and it ends up almost not even being a custom branded sonic, but something that, we have as it finishes the end of the video, and make sure that it kind of ends with that sound, that they're not usually up for actually doing a totally custom sonic sound that comes with the logo. And then it ends up being something, okay, how do we integrate the animated logo at the end of the video and tie that to the musical piece that's already, going to be part of that video?
Yeah. Do you think there's a reason for that? Like they just don't understand how powerful it is, or what's going on here?
I think that is a lot of it. I think people don't always, I've heard recently people have said an animated logo, that's like a luxury item. And it's okay, sort of. And so in many ways, I think, wow, if an animated logo is a luxury item, then the sonic branding of that animated logo is, for the 1%ers, I don't know. It's like the,
extra.
Yeah, extra special. But I think it just comes down to, funding and costs and how people are going to spend money. I think there have been tighter budgets the last few years, a little bit. The combination of the pandemic, 2 wars, uncertain politics and economics, a little bit of a fear of recession. I mean, all these things have made budgets a little bit tighter. And so maybe it's not always just the fact that it's a luxury item, but that it's, what's the, how do we monetize that ROI? It's very hard. I mean, look at the bum of Netflix.
Yeah.
Can you monetize that sound and say, oh, well, the KPI, on that is X, Y, and Z? No, you can't. It's very hard. And so, unfortunately, it doesn't work in the same way that, let's say, an SEO campaign does, where you can say, oh, we changed our keywords.
Yeah.
We, shot up this number of spots on Google searches, and therefore we know the value that we put into SEO.
Well, SEO is not the same as it used to be either now with the age of AI, because a lot of people are using their AI assistant to search. They're not using Google as much as they used to.
That is true. Yes, that is disturbing that industry as well.
Oh, yeah. Before I was a voice actor, I was doing SEO and internet marketing. So, I don't do it anymore, thank God. That's not something I want to spend time on anymore.
Yep.
But wow, is the industry changing, and I can see it happening. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It is. It is. It's going to be really interesting the next, 2 to 5 years to see how things change.
Yeah.
I am guilty of this. I have gone to ChatGPT and asked it a question that I would have normally asked Google. And it's been interesting, the results that I've gotten. Sometimes they're really way more helpful in ChatGPT.
Really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you an example of something really specific. Sure. I was trying to look up something so specific. I was like, I want a list of grants or funding, groups that fund women-owned businesses who are applying for grants and funding for animated short films. And the list I got from ChatGPT was very different than Google. And that was shocking to me. And in the end, I sort of had my list that was different on ChatGPT. And eventually I went to Google to do a search of it and find the website or something. Although I probably could have even just stayed in ChatGPT. But this was also like a year ago. So, it was earlier version of ChatGPT.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of uses that things like ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude and all of these are being able to do that are different from just the passive going into Google and searching. And I mean, as far as Google search is concerned, they must be having a fit right now. Like, I can't imagine that they aren't feeling that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I do in animation when I'm starting on a project is I often go to Pinterest, and I think of it as like the Google version of visuals, in that there's so many artists on there, so many creative people, and there's so many people that you can also follow who follow other people, like that. It helps curate a visual display of ways to inspire you.
Yeah. I'm sure the AI would do that too.
Yeah, I guess the difference between what the AI would do and what something like Pinterest would do is that with Pinterest, I'm also controlling maybe who I follow. Okay. And so if there's like an artist who they're inspired by a whole bunch of people that they follow, I want to follow that person. Whereas the filter is way wider. I'm sorry for hitting the mic. That is way wider on ChatGPT. Oh yeah. And this is actually part of the issue, right? Yes. That it includes everything, and you're like, well, I don't really.
And you get six fingers on the hands, or hands coming out of shoulders, or weirdness like that. Yes. Very strange stuff. Yeah.
Indeed.
It's funny what a computer thinks is viable.
Right.
It's kind of odd. Yeah.
Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.